Hi, the name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker. I'm proud of it. And pardon those little glitches. That's just the wonder of live to tape. And what live to tape is, it means for me, today is Friday. Therefore, everything I say is probably going to be obsolete by the time you see it on Tuesday. And on top of that, everything that goes on here is actually live, but live to tape. So if I fall off my chair, you're going to see me fall off my chair. If I stay on my chair, you're going to see me stay on my chair. If I press this button and disappear, you're going to see me press that button and disappear. The way my show works is basically I am not only the anchor, not only the person who talks, I'm also the engineer, and I do everything but set up the shot. And the wonderful staff over here sets up the shot for me. But I change cameras. I put up the little Fed Pride thing at the bottom. I also control the blue screen behind me. And behind me you see what is Google Earth. And I'm going to do my traditional spin of the Earth. And as you can see, I'm going a full 180 today. And when I walk over here, basically what you see is right behind you. Now I'm going to come in over here. This is Washington, D.C. And today I'm going to talk about the energy bill, but even more so I'm going to talk about energy in general. Why do I talk about energy on this show when it seems to be set up to take a look at not only our federal process and our three branches of government, but also foreign policy and our relationship, military and political, economic in the world. And why do I talk so much about energy? And the main reason I've been talking so much about energy is because, let's face it, energy right now is history. Is it going to be for very much longer? I don't think so. There's a legend out there that's put forward by the energy companies, particularly the industry that promotes oil imports to the United States, that we're heading toward peak oil, that we're going to run out of oil, and there's going to be a tremendous increase in the price of oil, which there already has been. And there's basically not going to be enough to go around. This is utter, complete, and total garbage. Even the Bush administration, which published an EIA, energy, I don't know, it's the administration that does all the statistics on energy. It's called the EIA, and the A is for administration. I'm not sure what the I is for. I think it's Energy Information Administration. They just published a study that says that right now energy is between $60 and $75 a barrel, and in 20 years it's going to be, they look forward to 2039, it's going to be about the same. It's going to be $65 a barrel. Why? Because there's going to be an increase in capacity, in energy capacity throughout the world, mostly in the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia has the ability to produce another 3 or 4 million barrels a day, but also all the way up and down the Middle East, the Persian Gulf, there's a lot of excess capacity. There's also excess capacity here in Nigeria, and there's tons and tons of excess capacity over here in Russia. Russia has successfully made the European Union dependent on it for energy, supplies 25% of its crude oil and 50% of its natural gas. There's a series of pipelines. I've talked to this. Geopolitical reality over here, geoeconomic reality of Europe becoming dependent on Russia. And Russia has becoming more and more totalitarian. It's become richer and richer, at least as a government, if not as a people. And Putin has really seen his oats and is putting a lot of money into military and is also creating kind of a new Cold War, and a new Cold War of petro countries, petro riches, and petro totalitarianism. Starting with Russia. Russia is not communist, and I'm not saying it's going back to communism, but Putin is an old KGB agent. The rhetoric that's been coming out of Russia lately, you can really see that influence. Another totalitarian country that opposes us all over the Middle East and throughout the entire Islamic region, Iran. And of course, the one that I feel is the most dangerous, and I've been talking to a lot in this show, is Venezuela under Hugo Chavez. Hugo Chavez has just finally nationalized the last two independent networks and basically sparked riots in the streets over soap operas because basically the biggest network that produced the most popular soap operas for the last 40 years was nationalized, and they have just gone off the air within the last month. So, and he now has satellites. Satellite in Bolivia that nationalized the tin industry and the natural gas industry, much to the disappointment of Brazil, which has been working for 20 years to get energy independent from the big energy companies. And then Ecuador. Ecuador's president was elected by a slight majority. He's also a left-winger, a populist, as they call him. He proceeded to call for a referendum, declared the Congress to be not existent anymore through police around it, would not let the opposition members of Congress in, and replaced Congress with a constitutional assembly, which is going to pass the Constitution, 100%, that will declare him give him the ability to rule by decree. So you see in Latin America, Brazil, the largest natural gas producer, or second largest after Venezuela. Venezuela, the largest oil producer, and Ecuador, the second largest oil producer, basically taken over by this little group supported by Russia. Last week I talked about Hugo Chavez is buying Russian submarines. One purchase of 5, another purchase of 4. Totaling $1.2 billion. Also has bought $2 billion worth of Russian planes, fighter planes. And basically, there are no real military powers in Latin America. Who is this aimed against? Who could it be aimed against except for the United States? Basically, he's also buying ships from Spain, of all places. We've objected to the Spanish selling ships to Hugo Chavez, and he's basically trying to create a blue water navy that can disrupt our ability to keep the trading lanes open. Same thing with Iran over here, and it is a problem. So what are we doing about it? Well, up to now, we've been doing nothing. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. With the one exception of deep water drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, they have now proven 15 million barrels in the American side of the Gulf, 10 billion barrels in the Mexican side of the Gulf. This is enough to produce 2 million barrels a day that are not produced right now over a period of 25 years. It's about a million barrels a day produces about 730, a million barrels a day is 365 million barrels. So if you produce 1 billion barrels, and if you have reserves of 1 billion barrels, you can produce 3 million barrels a day. If you have a potential for 25 billion barrels, that 25 billion barrels can basically produce about 3 million barrels a day for that period of time. They won't. It's probably going to be a little closer to 2. And then, of course, in Canada, right over here, this is Calgary, Saskatchewan, Alberta. Alberta's over here. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan. In Alberta, near Calgary, are the largest concentration of tar sands in the world. 2 trillion barrels of tar sands. Right now, they produce export about 2 million barrels a day to the United States. They have the capacity now, within the next 3 or 4 years, to produce another billion barrels, another million barrels a day of tar sand oil, and they have pipelines to produce as well. There's also talk about a natural gas pipeline starting in Alaska through Canada, through other natural gas fields to the United States. So there's a lot of oil to be had in what I call the NAFTA area, North American Free Trade Association, even though our own production has gone down to about 5.25 million barrels a day. However, it's really closer to 6 because there's something called petroleum liquids, which is not counted in as crude oil, and so we're really closer to 6. So basically, we got 6 in the United States, potential of 3.5 over here in Canada, another 2 in Mexico that can increase to 3. So we're talking 6, 9.5, 12.5 million barrels a day by about 2020 that is available within this NAFTA area. So what does this mean for America? Well, basically right now we consume about 21.9 million barrels a day, almost 22. It seems like a lot, but what people don't realize is that in 1979, we consumed 19.9 million barrels a day. So we've only increased by 10% in the last 28 years. How has this been possible? And that is possible because in the 10 years after 1979, between 1979 and 1989, we actually consumed a reduction of 1.5 million barrels a day. So we went from 19.9 to a little over 18 and then started going back up. How did we do that? The CAFE standards were increased, and that is the average mileage of a car and a truck was increased by over 50%, and that reduced the amount of oil that America used. And it took 28 years to go only 10% above that original amount. And if you figure 28% or 10% in 28 years, it's an increase of about, if it's compounded, less than 0.5% a year, more like a quarter. So the increase in the use of oil, and this is why this peak oil thing is just garbage, is minimal. It's tiny. And it only has been increasing in the last 3 or 4 years under Bush, to be very honest with you. Because basically, he's an oil man, he's beholden to the oil companies, and he is all for importing more and more oil. So what does that mean? That means that the last energy bill was all about giving tax breaks and giving money to the oil companies who were supposed to increase the drilling and the production of oil in the United States. In fact, it decreased. Did it need to decrease? Absolutely not. They have an incentive, especially the larger ones, especially ExxonMobil, to import as much oil. That is how they make their money. They do not make their money domestically, although they'd be happy to gouge us as well. So in my opinion, this is an industry that is endangering our national security, that is making America less safe, that is funneling American dollars from average Americans directly into the pockets of Hugo Chavez, of Putin, and of Ahmadinejad in Iran in order to make our enemies richer and more capable of buying military arms to be used against us and to support terrorism. So that's the bottom line. The bottom line is we have an industry that is completely unpatriotic and is working against our national security. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the Democrats have just passed another bill. This bill is a little bit different. Actually increased CAFE standards, which is the average mileage for an entire fleet of both cars and trucks. For the first time, right now, the CAFE standards are 27 miles a gallon for cars and 22.5 miles a gallon for light trucks. Light trucks are these Ram trucks, SUVs, so on and so forth that you see. So the mileage is improved, but in fact, it has not been increased since the 1970s, the CAFE standards. CAFE standards were achieved within 10 years. Our use of crude oil was reduced, and that was a big giant threat to the oil companies. Since then, GM over here in Michigan actually developed an electric car that basically the first 40 miles a day of commuting was completely supplied by electricity. They were a plug-in hybrid. And that was the Chevy electric car, the Impact. Great machine. People loved it. There's a movie about its destruction. And they passed it because here in California, California had independently increased the CAFE standards. Instead of going along with this, they did an experiment. They put out over 1,000, leased them out to people. People loved it. There was a tremendous word of mouth in California about it. And instead of going forward with that, in which case it would have been perfectly aligned to really kick the heck out of the Japanese companies in the 1990s, when gas prices finally went back up, they just lobbied against that law, they got rid of it, and they completely actually would not allow people to buy the cars that they were leasing, and they destroyed them. So there is a movie about that. So what are we doing now? So what we're doing now is we're increasing the average fleet of both cars and trucks to 35 miles a gallon, increasing it by a mile a gallon per year. By 2020, this will go from an average of 25 miles a gallon, which of course is less for SUVs, more for cars, all the way to 35 miles a gallon. Is this achievable? Absolutely. In Europe, they have tremendously fast cars. I lived in Germany myself, with 40, 50 miles a gallon. And these things have pickup like you can't believe, because you can actually get on a German Autobahn where you have to have incredible acceleration on these cars. Are some of them little? Some of them are little, but the little cars in Germany, which are made by American car companies. The Ka is made by Ford. The Smart Car is made by GM, which is Opel over there. 50 to 60 miles a gallon, and it's not even a hybrid. It's just a regular gas-powered internal combustion engine. So if they can do that with regular gas-powered internal combustion engines, you can imagine what the technology could be for hybrids. Ford is already coming out with a hybrid SUV, 34 miles a gallon. They've almost achieved what they're supposed to do in 2020. And of course, the car companies lobbied against that, were dead set against it. The other thing that got defeated was basically a tax transfer of about $29 to $32 billion from the oil importing companies. And I'm saying oil importing because the oil importing companies are the companies that are supporting Putin, Chavez, Ahmadinejad, Iran, Venezuela, and Russia, our sworn enemies. The enemies who eventually we will realize are undermining our lifestyle economy and our national security. Fought it tooth and nail. What was most of that? Most of that was here in the leases that were done in the Gulf of Mexico. The original rule for leases was that they would pay no tax, basically. They'd get a tax break. However, if the average price of crude oil went above $34 a barrel, the tax would be offset, and if it went above a certain level, it would be gone completely. These were conveniently left out of the leases, and for 10 years, they've already made $2 to $5 billion straight out of the hides of the American people, not paying taxes because certain government employees, and I'm for feds, but these people either made a mistake or made a mistake, and that should be investigated, never was, happened to leave out the one clause that said that there was a upper limit on the price of oil during which the oil companies can get this tax break. So they've been getting an illegal tax break for all intents and purposes. All they had to do really by far if they, and I'm not sure whether it's under FAR or some other federal regulation, but if there is something in law that is left out of a contract, the government has the right to put it back in the contract. They've been fighting that tooth and nail. They never put it back in the contract, especially during the Bush administration. Congress has tried to reverse this a number of times through investigation and through other purposes. And basically, most of these are ExxonMobil, few Chevron. They've been just fleecing us blind. Basically, we've already taken $5 billion out of our hide. Over the next 10 years, those are worth about $20 billion. So what they were trying to do was to actually pass this law, take that $20 billion and put it toward renewables, renewables being solar, ethanol, and other things. However, there were other good things in the bill. So the biggest thing of all is, of course, this increase in the mileage, fought for by the car companies, GM and Ford, but really fought for and lobbied by the big oil companies. Why? Because by 2020, this will lead to a reduction in imports of 2.5 million barrels a day. That is all the oil that we get from the Middle East, plus half the oil that we get from Chavez, or all the oil that we get from Chavez, plus all the oil that we get from all of the really hostile countries in the Middle East, like Iran and Saudi Arabia and some other places. So we could basically, just be getting oil from our friends if we put this thing through. Now you add that to another million barrels a day coming from a friendly source, which is Canada, another million barrels a day coming from another friendly source, which is Mexico, and that basically wipes out our dependence on Middle Eastern oil. And then, on top of that, talking about increasing renewable fuels. By renewable fuels, I mean fuels that are made from plants and foodstuffs. And they're talking about increasing ethanol of various kinds. There's about 2 or 3 different kinds of ethanol. There's ethanol from corn, ethanol from sugarcane, and then there's ethanol. There's a new technology which has been developed, of course, developed by who? The Canadians. American technology developed in Canada, where they discovered an enzyme that breaks down cellulose into sugars, which can be turned into ethanol. What happened? It was offered to American companies to produce energy. Basically, all the plants and all of the lawn waste and all this stuff going in, clogging up our landfills, can be going and being turned directly into ethanol. And it was rejected by our energy department and by the American companies and the American government, who was eventually were humiliated by Canada, and Canada is now already building these basically waste plant, ethanol plants all over Canada, and that's going to be spreading over here to America. What is this going to be? This is going to end up becoming 857 million barrels a year of ethanol, all told, 2.3 million barrels a day, an increase of about 2 million barrels a day. And I could be all wrong because the figures that I have over here could be total over a number of years. I'm assuming that that figure, which is 36 billion barrels, is yearly and not combining a number of years. So if they do produce 36 billion barrels, okay, 36 billion barrels, okay. Anyway, if you divide by 42 and then you divide by the number of days, you end up with approximately 2 million barrels a day. If that's possible, that's great. That would reduce it by 4.5 million barrels a day, and I could be wrong about that. And plus another million barrels a day coming from deep oil in Mexico, another million barrels a day coming from deep oil in America, another million barrels a day coming from tar sands in Canada. That means that we can reduce our oil imports from outside of NAFTA by about 7 million barrels. So 7 and plus 6, that's 13. And my name is Reed Silverin. Name of the show is Fed Pride. And thanks for watching.